G'day everyone, DJ Darks here. I'm finally back home in Japan, well, my Japanese home, where I can stream again. Now, I know that pushing out content has been really slow over the past 2 weeks, and there's a pretty good reason for it. Basically, I tried streaming at home on sort of my regular settings, and I was dropping 60% of the frames, meaning nothing was coming through the feed. So I sort of went, yeah, this isn't going to happen. So I gave up on streaming, and I thought, it's okay, it's cool. I can just record videos using my phone, like I did for that arson board video that I posted. However, I lost my phone. So I had nothing that I could use to record videos, basically. I've got my webcam on my computer, but the recording on that is terrible. The software that they give you basically gives you it's like a 320p video. It was so abysmally bad, and the audio was completely unaudible. You couldn't hear it at all. So I just figured, fuck it. I'll give up while I'm at home. I'll have a good holiday. I'll enjoy myself. And then I'll come back to Japan and start things up again. So yeah, sorry for that huge delay with material. I'll pick things up now, on a weekly basis. I'll try and get 2 or 3 videos out, and we'll see. We'll see how things go. Anyway, that's not what I wanted to talk about. Today I wanted to talk about ASCs. As you guys know, I was in Australia. I was playing on my really nice Sony KV-TV and my 2DX Real Edition controller, and I started to realise while I was playing it, at first I was like, yeah, sweet, I get to play on the Real Edition again, but I didn't really enjoy playing on that controller very much. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, hang on a second, Darks, it's a Real Edition. It's the real deal. It's the best controller you can buy. And on that note, I say yes. Alright, it's a good controller. But if you had to line up the DAOs and say which DAO is the best DAO, I would not choose the Real Edition. And there's a number of reasons why I say this. A lot of people sort of speculate that because it costs the most out of all of the controllers, that it is by default the best controller. However, that's way off, because what you're paying for, in essence, is aesthetics. You're paying for controller looks, okay? Now, what do I mean by looks? You get nice side metal plates, like the arcade has. It's like a side metal bit that goes, similar to the arcade shape. It's sort of flat and then it curves up. And then outside of the controller, at the very front, you get this nice leather strap, which goes on the front. So it's basically like a premium item. It's like the Mercedes-Benz look of the controller. It's a premium controller. Now, you think, okay, that's great. You get these extra bits, so obviously it must play better because of that. And then because you can rest your wrists nicely on top of that leather surface, and you don't get tense. But nobody rests their wrists while they're playing. Everyone sits sort of taut like this. No one sits like this when they're playing. It feels wrong. And at the arcade, you would never do that unless you're sitting down, which most people don't do. So that leather part doesn't add anything to playability. It's exactly the same playing on any of the other DJ DAO controllers as the Real Edition. In fact, I would even say that it is worse playing on the Real Edition, because that leather part actually adds another, 10 to 15 centimeters from you and the controller. So I'm going to turn sideways for a second. If I play standard like this, okay, this is the hand position that I have. If I'm on the Real Edition and I'm sitting on the floor like I was, my hands have to move 10 centimeters forward, meaning I've got to lean forward to be more comfortable. And what that ends up doing is it means that you're more uncomfortable while you're playing. I mean, I had to lean forward the whole time to play on the controller, and it was so frustrating because my lower back started getting really sore. And obviously, this means that you have to elevate the controller. And I went, okay, well shit, how am I going to elevate the controller enough so that I can actually play on that same level that I play on my regular controller at home? And it meant that I had to get a table and then I had to get a chair, and then it meant I had to lift the whole TV, and I just said, you know what, this isn't worth the effort. I'm here for 2 weeks. I just want to play on my damn controller. So, I just stuck to it. I sat on the floor and kept playing. And it was really annoying, because I couldn't sit comfortably where I was used to. Even at the arcade, I mean, I've got my stomach right up against the machine, whereas here, if I'm sitting cross-legged, I had to sit, 20, 30 centimeters away from what I was used to. So it's unplayable if you want to play it on the floor. You have to have it up on a table. Or you have to have it on like a keyboard stand or something if you're standing up. So that's the first issue with the Real Edition. It's just not space efficient. It's fucking massive. Like, it takes up 3 to 4 times the amount of space as the JKOC does. I mean, if you look at the comparison video that I put up on YouTube, you can see just how different the size is between the two. It's just, you have to compensate so much for that thing, and all you're really compensating for is aesthetics. You're not compensating for stuff which contributes to your gameplay, which is why I say, it's not very good. The second thing about it is, it's really heavy. Like, holy shit. I took the controller to Zythar's house, because I wanted him to test out the Arson board and see how it felt, and holy crap, guys, it is so heavy. I think in the Dow specs, it said it weighs like 10 kilos. Like, it's a workout. Like, 10 kilos isn't that bad if you're like lifting a dumbbell or whatever, which I used to do. But if you're lifting a controller that's 4 times the size of a regular KOC, that's 10 kilos, it is really, like, you gotta manhandle that thing. Like, my room's on the 2nd story of my house. Like, taking that down into a car and then taking it back like 3 flights into Zythar's house, oh man, it's a workout. Like, it is not very easy to move around. With the Real Edition, it's really a controller that you'd want to get only if you're going to leave it in one spot, and if you've got like the optimum conditions to do so. It is a heavy controller, and it is really, really hard to move around. So that was point 2. And obviously these 2 points just sort of mesh in together. It's heavy, it's not space efficient, and it's very uncomfortable to find a good position to play on. So you really need to factor these things in before you consider buying something like the Real Edition, because it's just such an investment, not just with your money, but with your space. Like, you need to have so much space for that controller. Like, when I go back home, I'll do a video with a comparison, just to show you guys the difference between these two. So, it's a good controller, okay? But it's exactly the same as the other DAOs in terms of playability. It's just bigger and heavier and more annoying to move around. So, let's look at the flip side of this. Look at the direct flip side, the FPS, which I've got here in Japan. The FPS is the size of a JKOC, okay? It offers the same amount of playability minus the turntable size. And as we've already discussed in other videos, the turntable size attributes for nothing. It's exactly the same playing on a small turntable as a large turntable. So, you get the same playability for a quarter of the size, half the weight, and on top of that, here's point 3 about the Real Edition. In the recent revisions to his controllers, DAO has made it so that everyone can swap play sides very easily. For example, the FPS, all you have to do is Allen key out the 4 screws, turn the keyboard around, and voila, you've got a 2-player controller. FPS, apparently now it's got magnetic parts, which you just clip off, turn it round, you're ready to go. Real Edition, you cannot turn it round, because the 2 plates are separate, completely separate. So you cannot turn a Real Edition to the opposite play side. It's the only DAO controller which doesn't allow you to do that. So you lose features for buying a DJ DAO Real Edition. Unless, of course, you get a doubles. But then, of course, if you get a doubles, you've got to have twice the amount of space if you want to use it. So it's just mind-blowing how bloody stupid and impractical it is to buy a Real Edition controller unless you have the money, the space, and the appropriate setup for it. So I would not recommend anyone to buy the controller outright. I would say if you're going for like an entry-level ASC, if you just want a controller which gives you the same experience, for God's sake, get the FPS. It is so much better in terms of like moving around and things like that. You won't really have any issues that you'd have with the Real Edition. You can use it basically anywhere. You can change player side if you order the wrong side, just perchance. And it's just like, there's so many downsides to the Real Edition as opposed to so many upsides to the smaller based controllers that I'd say go with one of the cheaper controllers. Unless you really love your metal bits and your leather and you've got a massive house and a massive setup which you can accommodate for, it's just not worth it in the end. So quickly, just before I wrap up like the main part of this video, I wanted to talk about probably the reasons, or what kind of controller would suit you. Like what kind of controller you'd want if you're looking for one at the moment. Because I know a lot of people have messaged me on YouTube saying, what controller should I get? I mean, I'm looking at this, but I'm not sure, and then there's the turntable issue. I will lay it out very simply in the next 2 minutes so you understand. If you're the kind of person who is moving house a lot, if you're a person who likes to take your controller around places and you use it a lot in different areas, get yourself an FPS, because it is by far the most portable, most affordable, and most efficient controller just for transporting. I bought one, I have not regretted it since. It is a fantastic controller. Okay? As for the turntable size, people who complain about that don't know what they're talking about. Small turntables attribute for nothing. If you put an arson board into your controller, it will make zero difference. It will feel exactly the same. Right, FP7. If you do actually care that much about turntables, the FP7 is also not a bad option. It's a little bit larger, it's a little bit heavier, but it's basically the same thing. You just get a larger turntable, and it feels closer to the arcade. I mean, when you turn the turntable, if you're doing like backspin scratches, that's the only time I think an FPS would show a major difference between the FP7 and the FPS. Like, the FP7's turntable feels probably closest compared like between the two, because it's a little bit larger. But other than that, it's a nice mid-level controller. I think it's really good, especially with the customizable options. If you want a pink controller, or if you want to have like a shiny, flashy green thing, then go the FPS. It's got more faceplate customizations than the FP7. Sorry, the FP7 has more customization options than the FPS does. Okay? If you want something perfectly replicated of the arcade, perfect turntable, same customization options, all of that jazz, but want to just sacrifice a bit of transportation and size, then the Platinum Edition is for you. It's the closest thing you'll get to the arcade without stepping up to the Real Edition, and you're not hindered by those aesthetics. So the Platinum Edition for people who want to have the exact arcade experience without all the downsides that I mentioned for the Real Edition. The Real Edition is good for people who are trying to make home cabinets, okay? So for example, people like Vincent, aka Berserker, yeah, for him, buying a Real Edition is fine, because he's got the space, he's got the cabinet, and it adds aesthetically to the whole thing. It looked amazing. If he'd put an FPS into that thing, it wouldn't have had the same effect in his video as it did. So that's just the basic overview. If you want, it's basically looks versus practicality, and you've got to trade off depending on which controller you buy. Anyways, that's it for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. If you want more content, please like and subscribe my stuff. But for the main video, that's it. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I'll